Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today I am bringing you another true life story, one filled with love, betrayal and a quick kind of revenge that cuts the deepest. What happened when trust is tested before the marriage and a single choice turn life ups and down. So stay with me. This one will keep you hooked until the every end.
She said it like she was commenting on the weather, casual and light, as though the words didn't weigh a thing. I'll keep my own place even after marriage, just to be safe if things change. My name is Caleb Danner, 32 years old. A former mechanic who once believed love was built like an engine. Tight bolts, steady fuel, and a promise it would run if you cared for it. But in that moment, hearing her, I realized love wasn't a machine. It was a lease with fine print I hadn't read. I raised my glass to hers and smiled, lips curved like I was agreeing. "That's smart," I said. My voice even sounded warm. But inside it felt like the wrench had slipped in my hand and the whole frame came crashing down. On the drive home, the streets looked sharper than usual, neon lights cutting through the night like blades. The house contract sat folded in my glove box, the ink barely dry from my initials. I'd walked through those empty rooms last week, saw sunlight pouring across the kitchen counter, imagined her laughter spilling out as she hung curtains. Now the image felt cheap, like a commercial for a life I'd never buy. At a stoplight, I caught myself whispering something my uncle once told me after his divorce. When someone keeps a spare key, they're already halfway out the door. The next morning, instead of taking the highway toward the realtor's office, I turned into a narrow street lined with aging brick apartments. I signed a lease on a one-bedroom unit that smelled faintly of old wood and rain-damp carpet. The landlord slid the key across the counter and I held it like a verdict. No fireplace. No vaulted ceilings. No backyard. But it was mine. And it was free of her conditions. I didn't text her. Didn't hint. I let her think the dream house was still ours, let her float in her illusion of control. Then at 9:17 a.m. the following day, her realtor called. I wasn't in the room when she answered, but I can still picture the way her fingers must have stiffened around the phone, the way her throat must have tightened as she realized I'd already stepped away. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives quiet, sharp, and simple, like a key turning in the wrong lock. And that was the first moment I stopped being her fiancé and became something else entirely. The call came while I was sipping burnt coffee in a diner that smelled like grease and yesterday's cigarettes. My phone buzzed against the counter, her name glowing on the screen, Claire. I let it ring. I knew why she was calling. By the time the third attempt lit up, I finally opened her message. "Caleb, the realtor says you pulled out of the house deal. Please tell me this is some mistake." I didn't reply. Instead, I dragged my fork through cold scrambled eggs, listening to the clatter of dishes and the hum of an old jukebox in the corner. Some part of me wanted to feel guilty, but guilt never arrived. Just a strange, quiet relief, like unclipping a weight I'd carried too long. When I walked outside, the morning air was damp, the kind that sticks to your skin. Across the street, a kid was tossing a ball against a brick wall. I watched him miss, watched the ball roll away, and for a moment I thought, that's what we were. Me throwing, her dropping, neither of us chasing after it. That evening she called again. This time I picked up. "Caleb," her voice shook, more brittle than I'd ever heard. "Why would you do this? We had everything lined up. The paperwork, the inspection." I cut her off, calm, almost detached. "You wanted your own place, Claire. I thought it was only fair I had mine too." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, short and sharp, like she was counting to 10 in her head. "That's not what I meant," she said finally. "Then tell me what you meant," I asked, even though I already knew. She wanted the exit ramp ready before we'd even merged onto the highway. That wasn't marriage. That was insurance. She didn't answer. She just hung up. Later that night, I unpacked a single box in my new apartment. Books. A lamp. My mother's old framed recipe card for cornbread. The walls were blank, the floor scuffed, but the place hummed with something the dream house never had: truth. I set my uncle's pocket knife on the windowsill. A family heirloom. The blade dull, handle worn, initials carved in. I don't know why I chose that moment, but I flipped it open and closed 3 times, listening to the click. That sound felt more honest than her promise had. As I lay down on the mattress that smelled faintly of dust and fresh start, I thought, she believed she'd built herself a safety net. She just never expected I'd walk away before she could use it. The morning after our last call, I woke to silence. No texts. No missed calls. Just the low rumble of trains passing beyond the cracked window of my new place. The sun came in weakly, painting the peeling wallpaper a tired yellow. It wasn't the dream house she had pinned on her vision board, but at least the air here didn't carry the scent of false promises. By noon she broke the silence. A knock at my door, sharp, rehearsed. I knew it was her before I even looked through the peephole. Claire, standing there in her neat blazer, makeup drawn too perfectly for a casual visit. Realtors always look like they're still showing something even when the deal's already dead. I opened the door halfway. "Caleb," she said, her voice pressed flat like paper, "what's going on?" "Why would you?" I leaned against the frame. "Why would I what?" "Back out." Without even telling me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was when my realtor called? Do you know what I had to say to her? I studied her face. The anger wasn't about us. It was about the image. The polished version of herself she sold to others. That's when I realized she hadn't been planning a marriage. She'd been curating a performance. "You wanted a place of your own," I reminded her. "I gave you that wish. Seems like a gift." Her jaw tightened. A flicker of something raw crossed her eyes before she smothered it under practiced calm. "You're overreacting. I only meant it as security. That's normal." "Normal?" I repeated. The word felt heavy, foreign in my mouth. My uncle used to tell me, people use the word normal when they're justifying selfishness. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I just wanted to be careful. That doesn't mean I don't love you." But love, I realized, wasn't careful. It wasn't a backup apartment or a lease signed in secret. Love was risk. And she'd already withdrawn before the first payment was due. I didn't argue. I just stepped back and let the silence stretch. She shifted, uncomfortable, waiting for me to fill it. I didn't. Finally she muttered, "This isn't finished," and turned on her heel, her perfume lingering in the hall longer than her presence did. I closed the door, slid the lock, and sat with my back against the wood. In my pocket, the pocket knife pressed against my leg, grounding me. 3 flicks open, 3 flicks shut. It hit me then, she hadn't lost a house. She'd lost me. And that, I thought, was the one deal no realtor could ever fix. A week slipped by without another knock on my door. I thought maybe she'd moved on, filed me under inconvenient endings, and returned to her carefully curated life. But then came the letter. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed, precise, slipped under my door in an envelope without a stamp. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, the same one that lingered after she stormed out. "Caleb, we need to talk. You embarrassed me. You made me look unstable to people I work with. That's not who I am. You know that. Please meet me at the old house we toured last month. I'll be there Friday evening." I folded the letter once, twice, then slid it beneath the pocket knife on my windowsill. Friday evening arrived like a storm that never broke. The air was heavy, restless. I drove past the glowing diner signs and the sleepy gas stations until I pulled up to the dream house that never was. The porch light burned dimly, like a ghost's lantern. She was waiting inside. The house looked different without possibility clinging to the walls. Bare, hollow. The echo of our footsteps swallowed our words before they could take root. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, her realtor's folder clutched like a shield. "Why here?" I asked. "Because this is what you ruined," she said flatly. I walked to the counter, ran my hand over the cold granite we once admired. "No, Claire. What's ruined is trust. You wanted a backup life before we even started this one. That's not marriage. That's exit strategy." She flinched, but her tone hardened. "You're twisting my words." "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe your words twisted themselves before they ever reached me." The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of the empty house around us. For a moment she looked small, almost fragile, as though she finally saw herself reflected in the hollow rooms. Then she whispered, "I just didn't want to be left behind." That hit harder than I expected. Because in her own way she wasn't planning for betrayal. She was preparing for absence. The kind I couldn't fix. I left without another word. Locked the door behind me. Back in my apartment, I set the letter on the table, the pocket knife on top of it, and listened to the trains rattle through the night. She wanted safety. I wanted truth. One of us was bound to leave empty-handed. The following Monday, I learned she hadn't let it die quietly. A coworker stopped by my desk, eyebrows raised. "Hey, Caleb. I didn't know you and Claire pulled out of that house." She mentioned it in passing, sounded like a whole scene. I forced a shrug. Guess she's telling stories. But inside my chest tightened. Claire wasn't just bruised, she was broadcasting. For her, image mattered more than air. And now I was being cast as the unreliable fiancé, the man who walked away from commitment. By lunch, I'd heard it again, this time from an old mutual friend who texted, "What happened? She's saying you blindsided her. That evening I sat in my apartment with the window cracked, train horns drifting in with the cool air. I flicked the pocket knife open and shut, each click syncing with my thoughts. She wanted the story told her way. I'd let her. For now. 2 days later, her name appeared in the local paper's property section. A full-page feature on young professionals navigating the housing market. There she was, smiling beside a photo of the dream house, explaining how her fiancé pulled out unexpectedly, leaving her to reconsider her future. I read it 3 times. She hadn't just made herself the victim, she'd painted me as a cautionary tale. That's when I remembered something small, almost trivial. During our last tour of the house, she dropped a business card. I'd pocketed it absent-mindedly. It wasn't her realtor's. It was a mortgage consultant's, with notes scribbled in her handwriting: backup plan, apply solo. She hadn't planned for us. She'd planned for her. I sat there, the article open on the table, the card beside it. My uncle's words echoed again. People don't reveal themselves in arguments. They reveal themselves in what they prepare for. That night I drafted an email. Short, sharp. Attached the scanned card. Sent it to the same reporter who'd written her story, subject line, other side of the deal. I didn't expect a reply. But the next morning my phone buzzed. Would you be willing to go on record? I stared at the message, the watch on my wrist ticking steady. For the first time I realized this wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about reclaiming the story. And maybe, just maybe, letting the whole town know the truth she tried to bury under polished smiles and half-spoken fears. The article broke on a Thursday. Front page of the local living section. A tale of 2 Lises, when love and property collide. My name wasn't plastered in bold, but it didn't need to be. Everyone who knew us understood. The reporter had taken my side carefully, quoting me just enough to suggest balance, but not enough to look vindictive. The scanned mortgage consultant card was printed at the bottom of the piece, her handwriting visible: backup plan, apply solo. Proof that she had been ready to walk long before I did. By noon my phone lit up with messages. From a cousin: damn, Caleb didn't know she was like that. From an old friend: guess she was playing both ends, huh? Good on you for catching it. Even from my boss, in his clipped tone: saw the paper. Smart man knows when to step away. I should have felt triumphant. But instead there was this odd hollowness. Like I'd won a fight I never wanted to enter. Claire, though, she didn't stay quiet. That evening she showed up outside my building. I spotted her through the cracked blinds, standing near the street light, arms wrapped tight around herself like armor. When I stepped outside she didn't waste time. You humiliated me. Her voice was sharp, trembling at the edges. You did that to yourself, I said, steady but low. You didn't have to go to the paper. You could have just talked to me. I shook my head. I tried. You hung up. You lied. You built exits while I was building a home. For a second her face cracked, the mask slipping. Then came the tears, not dramatic, not loud, but real. She whispered, I didn't want to end up abandoned like my mother. I thought if I had a place of my own, I'd never be left with nothing. Her confession hit like a dull hammer. It didn't excuse her, but it explained her. Fear had been her architect, not malice. Still, the damage was done. I'm sorry for her, I said quietly. But I'm not marrying her ghost. She stared at me like she wanted to argue, to claw back some version of herself untouched by consequence. But she couldn't. Not this time. When she finally turned and walked away, the night air felt colder. I flicked the pocket knife open once, shut it, and slipped it back into my pocket. Some endings arrive with shouting. Ours arrived with silence. The silence after she walked away lingered longer than her perfume ever had. For the first time in months, my apartment felt like mine. Not a waiting room for a future with her, not a halfway house between arguments. Just mine. But the town wasn't done talking. At the hardware store, 2 men leaned on the counter, lowering their voices when I walked by. At the gas station, a clerk gave me a knowing nod, the kind reserved for someone who dodged a bullet. Small towns don't keep secrets. They pin them to bulletin boards and gossip over black coffee. I didn't fight it. Let the story grow on its own. One evening, I sat on my worn couch with the window open, listening to the trains roll past. In my hand was my father's old watch, the second hand still stubborn, still ticking. That watch had survived 3 owners, a cracked face, and years of neglect. And yet it worked, steady, loyal. I couldn't help but think, love should have been like this watch. Instead, ours had stopped before it ever began. I thought of Claire then, not with anger but with a strange, quiet sorrow. She had built a cage out of her fears, and when I refused to step inside, she called it betrayal. Maybe one day she'd understand the difference between safety and love. Maybe she never would. A week later I got a letter. Handwritten this time, shaky ink. Caleb, I know I ruined what we had. I wasn't honest. I was scared. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know, I did love you. In my broken way, I did. I read it once, twice, then set it beneath the pocket knife on my windowsill. Another relic. Another object heavy with meaning. But I didn't reply. Because sometimes the kindest revenge isn't exposing someone or humiliating them or even walking away. Sometimes it's leaving them with their truth, unedited, and never granting them the comfort of a response. As the trains wailed through the night, I closed my eyes and whispered to the silence, "You kept your place. And I kept mine." And with that, the story was finished. Not neatly, not cleanly, but finished all the same. What lingered wasn't anger. It was peace. The final chapter didn't arrive with drama. No slammed doors. No shouting matches in front of witnesses. Just a slow settling, like dust after demolition. Weeks passed. Claire faded from the paper's whispers, replaced by newer scandals. A councilman's resignation, a fire at the feed store. In small towns, outrage has a short shelf life. But for me, the silence grew into something sharper. The kind you hear when you've been holding your breath too long and finally exhale. I spent evenings in my apartment, bare walls slowly filling with pieces of myself. A framed photo of my mother, a crooked bookshelf rescued from a thrift store, the watch ticking steady on my nightstand. Even the pocket knife found its place, resting on the windowsill like a sentry. Symbols of endurance, of survival. One night as the trains rattled by, I caught myself staring at that knife. 3 flicks open, 3 shut. The rhythm had become my lullaby. It wasn't about the blade. It was about the reminder that tools are only as dangerous as the hands that hold them. Love is the same. Claire once said she wanted her own place, just in case things change. I finally understood she was right. Things do change. People change. Promises bend until they break. And maybe the real mistake wasn't her caution, but my belief that love could be built without cracks. Still, I don't regret walking away. Because by leaving the house deal behind, I found something larger than brick and mortar. I found a home inside my own choices. The last time I saw her was in passing. She was at the grocery store, her arms full of bags, head bent low. For a second her eyes caught mine. No words. Just a flicker of recognition, of what we were and what we'd never be again. Then she turned away, disappearing down another aisle, like a chapter closed mid-sentence. I didn't chase. I didn't speak. I just walked out into the cool evening air, the sky streaked with pink, the train horn echoing faint in the distance. And in that moment, I understood something my uncle once said after his own heartbreak. Sometimes revenge isn't about winning. It's about walking away lighter than the person who tried to weigh you down. That's what I carried with me. Not anger. Not bitterness. Just the freedom of having chosen truth over illusion. And that was the last time anyone called me her fiancé.